Hello, strangers. Happy Tuesday. And as we do on every Tuesday, here's another true, scary story. This one's not from family or friends. This is from me to you. Story number 28. When I was really little, I got meningitis. We'd been on some camping thing or day trip into nature. My parents, some of their adult friends, their kids, and me. We had hot dogs. We had a fire. We took a few dips swimming in the lake. One of my parents' friends, a guy called Michael, also got it. We were both hospitalized, but while I got better, he didn't. I didn't know what exactly death was at that point. My parents tried to tell me. I did get that they wanted me to understand. Their eyes were all pink and puffy from crying, and that made me want to cry too. So I said I understood. But I remember my thought on it. I had seen the nursing staff come in late at night, waking me with their clatter, and they'd taken Michael into another room. To me, they had just moved him somewhere else in the hospital. And at some point he'd be wheeled back in and we'd play old maid or go fish again. Michael was gone, but only to another room. And when I got well enough to leave the hospital, I looked back at that big white and gray building and pictured Michael somewhere inside. Maybe he was watching TV or taking a nap, but he was in there all right, soon to come out too. I didn't think much more about it. I had other things to worry about coming my way. The first night back from the hospital, I was in bed in my room. It was a little weird to be the only one in the room after weeks of being in a hospital. It took me a while to drift off, but eventually I did, falling deep into the silence that, for weeks before, had been studded with beeps, whooshes, and chirps from all the hospital equipment. But sometime in the spare change of night's pocket, I woke up. The room was dark, save for the orangey glow of my mushroom nightlight. My eyes tracked about, looking for what had woken me, but there was nothing out of place in the room. And then, I saw it in the doorway to my room. There was a man standing there. This was not alarming. I was all of 5 and thus knew 3 or 4 adult men total. This plus in my house plus late at night equaled that's my dad in kid brain math. My dad worked late nights at the Gerald Gentleman Station, the largest power plant in the whole state, and he often missed bedtime tuck-ins. It wasn't weird to see him in the doorway, whispering a little prayer to add to my usual "now I lay me." So my eyes started to slide closed again. But that was when I noticed something different. As my eyes were closing, dark sliding over my view of the wall and top of the door frame, I saw that my dad, who, on a good day, stood 5 feet 8 inches, was too tall to fit into the frame. He had a long arm bent above his head, leaning against the lintel, the strip of wall between the door and the ceiling. His head and neck were craned down, leaning into the room. I'd seen my dad stand at my door 1,000 times, and he wasn't tall enough to brush the door frame with his head, let alone have to lean down and into the room like that. And that's when I realized it. It was not my dad. As my child brain tried to figure out what a man who was not my dad was doing in my house this late at night, it was overruled by pure animal survival instinct. I didn't know who was in my doorway. I did know, however, that I needed to stay very, very still. I needed to pretend to be asleep pretend that I didn't know he was there, that I didn't know he wasn't my dad. My arms and legs itched to move, my body shifting and twitching in fright and desire to leap from my bed and run away from the danger. I struggled to stay still, full of the terrible knowledge that if the man sensed I knew he was there and not my father, he would get me. It wouldn't be like the got you in tag or baseball either. It was a bad get you, like on the news my parents watched. But my effort to stay still was for naught, because just as I had these thoughts, the man knew. And I know he knew, because his arm came down and his too tall form came into my room, and in a strange voice he started to speak. His voice was low and whispery at first, stretched out sounding, but this too changed as he swept into the room. Like his voice was a bit of videotape on which someone hit the fast forward and volume up at the same time. It rose in volume, speed, and pitch as he rushed in, his voice the loudest thing I'd heard in weeks from the meningitis-induced stuffiness in my hearing, saying,
"I told you."
And on this last word, I felt his outstretched hands hit the bedspread, a weight on my chest and throat and face. I cried out and tried to scrunch away, squinting my eyes shut as I did, and when I opened them again, no one was there. No terrible voice screaming in my ears, no long hands on my neck or chest. The room was completely as it should be. It had all been a dream. The panic receding, I felt relieved and exhausted, ready to fall back to sleep. As I started to drift again, my eyes slid around the room, one last perimeter check as I began to doze. Orangey mushroom nightlight, book on the floor with the Raggedy Ann bookmark poking out, my dad in the doorframe praying for me, his body oddly stretched to where he was taller than the door. The scene repeated itself over and over again. At some point, I must have wet the bed. I felt the wet go from hot to cool to unpleasantly cold and damp. This helped me mark time, understand that it was happening over and over again. The same thing happened the next night and the next. Sometimes I would wake up, really wake up, and I'd run to my parents' room, begging them to come lay with me. On occasion, my mom would relent, and if I could go to sleep with her weight and breath next to me, the nightmares would cease for the night. But my parents, not wanting to give me a complex or get me so used to it that I'd be stunted later, more often just sent me back to bed and back into the cycle of what my brain was playing on repeat. It got to the point where I was terrified of bedtime. You know that seeping dread you get on a Sunday night, knowing the drudgery of your work week is peeking around a corner, waiting for you the second Sunday night gives way to Monday morning? It's like that, but it was every night. As a 5-year-old, it was hell. There was nothing special or notable about the night that something changed. I brushed my teeth, put on my pajamas, and recited the list of people whose names I knew for God to bless. Same orange mushroom nightlight, same stuffed dog toy, same weary dread. I laid in bed, counting until it was time for the same last-minute plea to my mom to come save me from the clutches of the tall man. I remember it was a night my dad had off, and hoping he would help, I walked to his side of the bed to ask. The next thing I remember, I was back in bed, and the comforting weight and breath of my father was next to me, between me and the wall. I was happy. I opened my eyes to confirm my father's presence at my side, but I was on my back, and thus, opening my eyes, the first thing I saw was the doorway into my room. And there he was. The tall man was leaning into my room again. The scene started, the tall man's arm coming down, dark holes of his eyes and mouth beginning to yawn wide to bellow his line. And in an instant, a new voice spoke. The voice sounded from between my head on the pillow and the wall. It was not my father's voice, but it was a voice I recognized. A voice I'd heard many times, just this last year alone, as we'd shared a hospital room. "Stop this now." It was Michael's voice. Michael's voice was not loud or angry, but more matter of fact. All at once I felt the room sort of depressurize. All the tension, the knots in my arms and legs locking me still, just released. The tall man blinked out of existence, gone without a trace. Astonished, I turned to see my friend from the hospital, my actual savior, the source of the voice that banished the tall man from my room. But there was no one there. Had I dreamt him too? He had felt real. I mean, the presence of him, his weight shifting, pulling at the coverlet as he had settled on my bed on top of the duvet, breathing, warm. I reached out, not afraid to for the first time in a month of sleepless nights, and I touched the wall where he'd have to have rested. My twin bed was too small for grown-ups, and the wall, where he would have leaned up against it, was warm to the touch. I never saw the tall man again. It's been years even since I thought about him, but my dad had brought my nightmares, now called night terrors, up at dinner and prompted me to recount the story. I guess I never told them how it all had ended. They were stunned. My parents confessed that they chalked up the sudden nightmares and bedwetting to symptoms from the meningitis, and were a little confused, even hurt that I hadn't told them enough for them to grasp the severity of how terrifying it all was. I mean, dreaming up strange men in your room, what did you think had happened? And when I do think about it, remember what my kid brain had concluded, well, it goes like this. I have a friend. My friend is named Michael. Michael had to go somewhere else. I missed my friend. Going to sleep was weird because Michael wasn't there anymore. A bad man came at night. Michael came back. Michael stopped the bad man and took the bad man away with him. The bad man is gone far away. The bad man won't come back. Thus, Michael has gone far away too. Michael won't come back either. That's what passing away means. Going to sleep isn't weird anymore because I understand Michael isn't somewhere else. I understand. He's gone. And I guess that makes as much sense as any other explanation ever could. And that's story 28. The origin story of why yours truly still sleeps with a nightlight. All the usual prompts and requests. Like, comment, subscribe. It does something, it doesn't do anything. Algorithm schmalgorithm. There's over 240 of you now. Where on earth did you come from? I don't know, but I am certainly glad that you're here. And I hope to speak with you again soon. So stay strange, stay safe, and take care, strangers.